Great, thanks for that. So yeah, welcome everyone. Welcome to our Tech Leader Chats. And this week with this cadence that changes quite a bit, we've got Elise Wei from Dev Academy Aotearoa and Ruth McDavitt from Summer of Tech talk to us about how to support junior developers to thrive. And so yeah, really great to see a huge mix of people here. And I'm especially looking forward to what we learn and then the discussions afterwards. This is the rough plan. Got the intro, then Elise will speak. Oh my gosh. Yeah, Elise will speak for 15 minutes. Then Ruth is going to talk for 5 minutes. We'll have 10 minutes of Q&A and then breakout room discussions towards the end, which is not recorded. And so if you have any questions, just put them in the chat and then we'll leave them until the end, until the Q&A section. Cool. All right, so Elise can start off. I know Elise from Xero. She was a senior engineer on the design systems team and also a people lead. And I saw her support many a grad who rotated through a team, including one of our own developers, James, who is now a front-end developer at Multitudes, but was in Elise's team before. And she's now a practice lead at Dev Academy Aotearoa, which is New Zealand's 15-week coding program that gets people from zero to work ready. And so, yeah, really keen to have you here, Elise. I'll pass over to you.
All right, I'm just gonna share my screen and, oh, no, not that one. You don't want that one. Zoom. Boo.
Presenter mode, yay.
Let's try this.
Perfect.
Better? All right, super. Cool. So thank you so much for the kind intro, Jenny. We will get right into it because I've got 15 minutes and I'm going to use them all. All right. So supporting junior developers to thrive. I hope you're in the right place. And if you're not, you're in for fun anyway. So what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to talk a little bit about some research that we've recently done here at Dev Academy. So a little bit about the research, some of the pleasant surprises that we encountered, some other observations. And then mostly I'm going to talk about the factors that went into success for the folks that we talked to in this research. There'll be time for questions at the end, and the slides will be shared out also afterwards. So you'll have access to this as well as my notes. There's also a hidden slide that's not shown here because my PPH was I only have 15 minutes. Cool. So about the research happened through May through July of this year. We spoke to 22, maybe more, organizations, mostly New Zealand based, though some were based overseas and have operations in New Zealand. Those organizations ranged in size from 5 people, tiny little startups, to 6,500 person big global corporations. We spoke to people in an array of different industries, and the folks that we individually spoke to were anything from founders and CTOs right down to the developers, sometimes intermediate developers, who were working directly with junior developers to get them onboarded. And in those conversations, we talked about junior devs, of course, both generally and Dev Academy grads, but every conversation started with the question, what does it look like to onboard juniors at your organization? And then certainly we would evolve the conversation into more specifics from there. A brief disclaimer about why we did this research. So we were looking to help in this space. Dev Academy wants to help. And we want our grads to get hired, and we want them to have a great experience when they do get hired. But our core mission is really around supporting and growing the tech industry in Aotearoa. So while there are certainly some ways that I think that we can help, and I'll be really excited if you want to talk about those, there's not a single thing that I'm going to talk about today that you need us for. You can do all of this on your own, and maybe some of them you already are. So here we go. Pleasant surprises. Number one was that leadership, especially senior leadership, really understands the value of investing in the talent pipeline and that they're willing to spend the time and the resources it takes. Sometimes this was to the exasperation of the managers and the developers who are actually doing that onboarding. But it was really great news for us because we were excited to see that senior leadership really was bought into this idea of growing tech talent from the bottom here in New Zealand. And On top of that, time spent by the teams was considered an acceptable cost. This was actually not something that we expected going into this research. We had a hypothesis that this would be a big pain point for people, but we were actually delighted to hear that everybody just kind of saw this as the cost of doing business. And that some places are confident that they're doing this really well, that they're really happy with their onboarding, their whole onboarding setup. And that was fantastic, actually, because it meant that we had a lot that we could learn from them. Other observations, everybody's willing to teach their own specific stack, meaning that juniors, while they are expected to know a stack, you're all willing to teach them if they don't know your specific stack, which is great. Love that flexible thinking. Juniors were typically hired on attitude and problem solving, or what I call potential. And then everybody that we spoke to mentioned pairing with more senior developers as a tool for onboarding juniors. Now, this might seem obvious, but it points to some interesting questions and also possibilities. And so we'll come back to this a little bit later on. And then this last one, the time to get up to speed could be 1 week or it could be 1 year. This was pretty wild and a little surprising, I think, for us. While most places tended towards the weeks end of things rather than months or years, but some places, in particular, legacy systems, large organizations, and sometimes in industry, if it's a very heavily regulated industry, those might be factors in it taking much longer for junior devs to begin being productive or productive in the eyes of the rest of the organization. So on to factors that contributed to the success of bringing in and really nurturing junior talent in these organizations. There's a handful that we're not going to go into depth about today, including the individual abilities and personality of those junior developers. Certainly, there's going to be wide variance there. Your hiring practices, your hiring and selection process, which is going to determine who shows up for that first day of work. So, that could be a whole nother talk. We're not really going to get into that today. So once they're in the door, what you do as an employer, as a manager, or as a teammate, that's going to make a huge difference in the success of junior developers. And that's largely what we're going to talk about today. Number one, onboarding process. So this is probably not a huge shock. Having your act together makes a big difference. So let's talk about how to do this. You can see some quotes from our research participants. The folks that we talked to had a lot to say about either their processes that weren't working for them, or sometimes the processes that were working really well. So specific recommendations that I'll talk about in terms of this. If you don't have a process, there's no official process, then you want to write one, because something happens when new starters join your organization. So start by documenting what the most recent new hire did and what was done to support them. Then ask them what they wish had happened and use that as kind of your first draft of your onboarding process. On the other hand, if you do have a process, but it's not documented, well, then document it, get it written down, get it out of somebody's head so that other people can refer to it, and make sure that that document gets checked and updated. So in both of these cases, case one and case two, you want that to be a living document. You want it to get looked at, used, revised, added to every time you have a new starter go through the process. Now, I'm sure probably, again, this is not a huge revelation for anybody. Hopefully this is stuff that you're all doing, but now if you need to, you can go back to the rest of your team and say, this is totally backed by research. Elise said that we had to do this. So feel free. Thirdly, if there is a document, you have a document, but nobody uses it, then figure out why. Does everybody know where it is? Do they know who should use it and when? Can it be converted into a more useful format? Like, what if it was a Trello template that got copied over for every new starter and included a list of tasks and the times that they should be doing those things? Can you store it in a more obvious place or surface it at a more convenient time? And then for the last one, ask what could be improved. So I touched a little bit on the idea of continuous improvement, but keep asking junior devs and the people who are onboarding them how your onboarding documentation and process could be better. All right, so that one's kind of a gimme. Professional development. So there's a bunch of quotes in here. from the folks that we talked to about professional development, about growth, about learning. So in addition to helping juniors get comfortable and up to speed, that we also heard that professional development was a big factor in both recruitment, so attracting that talent, and then also retention for juniors and also people further on in their careers at your organization. So what can we do about this? Well, number one, set expectations around learning and build in time for it. Actually dedicate the time for your employees to learn things, to learn new stuff. And maybe it's not work relevant, but they feel like they're growing, and that really helps their overall ability to contribute to the organization. If you joined us for the first one of these tech leadership chats back in June, you will have seen Rachel Collingridge speak about getting, building that culture of learning within your organization. And this is super massive, really, really helpful. Number two, begin setting growth goals for juniors as early as possible. So sometimes junior developers don't know exactly what they want, and that's okay. You can build some goals around exploration, discovery, figuring out if they want to specialize in something, getting them exposure to different parts of the business. And then thirdly, clearly communicate roles and levels. So if you don't already have clarity around what's required at each level of growth in your organization, try to get that clarity and then let the engineers know. This not only gives juniors certainty about their place in the world and also something to aim for and strive towards. It will help support them so in their growth to intermediates, but it will also help support your intermediates to grow into seniors. Cool. So yeah, professional development, really, really exciting stuff. Okay, mentorship. As I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, one-on-one support from a more senior engineer is the primary way that juniors get up to speed. As you can tell from some of these quotes, one theme that we heard loud and clear is that there is a wide variability in the quality of mentorship junior devs receive. It can vary massively from team to team, from mentor to mentor. So this is a pretty significant variable. It's a key part of the process, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. So what can you do to make this a strength for your organization and your talent pipeline? Okay, one, ensure that mentorship is actually happening. If you don't have seniors, which some places don't, or if your senior engineers are unavailable to mentor, you need to get support for your junior developers somewhere else. You can find programs outside your company, out in the community, and pay somebody if you need to. Number two, who are the best mentors in your organization? Ask juniors about their experience. How can the great mentors who already are in your organization help upskill everyone else in this area? Three, I just mentioned growth frameworks. So if you have a growth framework for your engineers, ensure that mentorship and coaching skills are required for them to advance. And then last but not least, if you're requiring this for people to advance in your organization, well, now you have to provide them with the opportunity to get those skills. You have to provide that support. And so if that's not something that you can do internally to your organization, again, you might need to look outside and find programs for how to grow the mentors in your organization. Cool. So this is going to be the last one of these. And I realize this is absolutely not going to be feasible for everyone, but even hiring a pair of people at the same time will mean that they're not going through that onboarding process alone. If they're both early career or if they're both in engineering, all the better. Now, doing this sort of like batching, this clustering, gives you increasing economy of scale in that onboarding process, and it can help you build your reputation as a company that fosters engineering growth. Now, you'll note the second quote on here talks about each cohort mentoring the next. And one of our study participants referred to this process as the mentorship cascade, which I thought was a really beautiful way to describe that. So as you might have guessed, I come most recently from Xero before I was at Dev Academy, and the ultimate version of hiring in clusters is something like an in-house grad program where you get to massively capitalize on the benefits of hiring a cohort. But again, just hiring 2 or 3 new starters in a cluster can give you similar benefits at a smaller scale. So how do we go about doing this? Well, do the thing, number one. Even if you hire two people in different specialties, like maybe a designer and an engineer, you'll still find that they're supporting each other and that they kind of bond over that shared experience. And then plan intakes for a low stress time of year. So doing this intentionally lets you really think ahead, and you get to bring your new hires in at a time when they're going to get the best support from the rest of the team, and hopefully a really comfortable setting to find their feet. Cool. Recap time. So the four main areas that I mentioned are onboarding processes, professional development, mentorship, and hiring in clusters. Now, as I mentioned early on, we did this research to try to determine how we might be able to help. And we certainly came out of this with some ideas, particularly around onboarding clusters of junior devs and also building really strong mentorship skills in the developers who are responsible for growing that next generation of tech talent. We would absolutely love to hear from you if you'd be interested in working with us in those areas. But again, these are all things that you can start on right now for yourselves. And maybe you already are. So if you're already nailing most or all of these things, then I suspect you're probably doing great. Or if you're doing all of these things and you're still struggling, if you're willing to share, I'd really be interested to hear about that experience, because honestly, this work is never done. It will never be done for us. This was one specific phase of our research, but there will be many more. So what are your questions? And are we holding questions for after Ruth is done as well?
I think we could do a couple of questions now, and then we'll do, and then we'll go to Ruth. But yeah, maybe we'll spend 5 minutes on questions now, and then we'll come back afterwards. Yeah, but thanks so much for sharing that, Dan. And I think it'd be such a good one for further like diving into discussions. Yeah, so I might move on to Ruth and have her share her 5 minutes about what they've learned at Summer of Tech. Yeah, if that's okay.
Kia ora koutou. Having an awesome work from home moment. People are nodding and saying they can hear me. Excuse the 3-year-old in the background. Love my life on a rainy day. My name's Ruth. I'm really honoured to be here, see so many old friends and new friends. I'm part of a small team at Summer of Tech, connecting employers and students, recent graduates for paid summer internships in Aotearoa. We work both sides of the bridge, so employer side and candidate side, bringing everybody together for success. So I'm really here to tautoko or support Elise's presentation. I was really keen to hear the research and it resonates, and I thought I was really nervous. 5 minutes isn't long to say, yeah, I agree with what Elise said. So I thought, how can I explode this 5 minutes? And I'm going to talk about the whole thing: finding, growing, retaining, and +1 on everything Elise said. All right, now I'm down to 4.5 minutes. So I am going to try and cover off that with just a few little insights, which is hopefully going to spark some awesome kōrero conversations shortly. We work with a whole bunch of newbies, especially Dev Academy grads, very, very huge favourites. Working with around 80% in terms of internships, so short form 10-week summer or winter or anytime you like internships. But we also do have grad roles and part-time roles and anything you like, really. So here's my key lessons for finding juniors. I did want to do a big plug for internships as a try before you hire type strategy. If it's done right, you can connect early and super early. Seen very successful internships with people in their very, very, very early education for tech careers. It really comes down to the support you can wrap around with them. So hire early, +1 on what Elise said: attitude, aptitude, potential. On your side, it's imagination. You know, how can you spot the potential? How can you see where someone is going to go and how you can get them there? I just wanted to quickly resonate on Elise's mention of up to speed, and I love this. My response to that is, how are you defining what that looks like? So the biggest success, I think, my lesson for you today is redefine what delivering value as a junior means and chunk it down. And if you're not getting value in the first week, chunk it down into smaller chunks, because you should be getting value in the first week. And if you're not, you're doing it wrong. So there's my challenge to you. Happy to talk about that. I'm being deliberately provocative in what I say. So if you haven't successfully hired newbies before, you definitely need to completely rebuild your recruitment process from the ground up, and also acknowledge that your future junior talent might not look like what your past junior talent looked like. The world has changed. We're seeing an amazing diverse range of candidates coming from really different career pathways. So let go of your expectations and unleash your imagination. Connect early. And ask yourself for your recruitment process, how do I let this person shine? How can they show me what they can do? Forget your technical test, forget your code review, do something different to let them show you how they can work in the job. How do you grow them? I'm not going to cover much on onboarding. Just wanted to say that for onboarding and training, we have seen everything. We have seen anything from a rotational program for an internship. We've seen an intense full-on training on our tools. We've seen pairing, we've seen BOU shadowing. We've seen it all, and if done right, any of those approaches can work. It's really about being well prepared, as I said, define what success looks like for both of you, and adapt as you go. Hire them, employment contracts, real work, paid, fair wage, and then help them shine. Think about learning from them as well, and also as your mentors and team learns and grows. Building the confidence of your mentors and building the pool of mentors, plus one on what Elise said. And it's actually about the whole team being part of that journey. Everybody in your organisation can be a support for all your newbies and everybody up and down the chain. Plus one on hiring in clusters and batches. Also, if you don't have capacity to mentor, you can outsource that, right? If you haven't got anyone on your team who identifies with your junior or with anyone on your team, find somebody outside your organisation in the community who would like to help them out. And if you do this for a couple of years in a row, you're going to have this ever renewing cycle of interns, and then last year's interns can be mentors next. So Elise has covered this super well, but I just wanted to touch on retaining. My message here is, once you've used your imagination, spotted potential, engaged early, connected, grown your team around them, retention is going to be easy. Rinse, repeat, keep doing it. Acknowledge that we're in a global community here, and if your juniors go off and disappear out there, don't worry, they'll be back. And then there'll be others who've been well trained in other industries to come and join your team. I think everybody, I'm talking to the converted here, but if we're all hiring juniors today, then we're going to have more and more seniors tomorrow. I haven't timed myself, forgot to set the timer. I'm just about wrapping up. So kia ora koutou, thank you. This is if I leave a bit more time, we can have more discussion and more questions. Yeah, so thank you, Elise. That was really super interesting. Thank you, everybody, for coming along, and really excited to keep chatting. That's all I got.
Oh, amazing. Thanks so much, Ruth. That was such a rapid fire, but I think you summed it all up really well, and also gave some really great specific examples, so that was really nice. Yes, so I guess we're on to questions. And so, yeah, we'll have 10 minutes now for questions from the audience. We've also got some questions that people submitted when they registered for the event, so I'll start with those. But feel free to just message in the chat and then we'll pick from those. So, including if you want any further clarification or deep dives on anything Ruth or Elise mentioned. I'll start off with one that we had from Samora, who I believe is here in the, they sent the question in earlier on Meetup, is what do you consider the most important principle to enabling a junior to thrive? Oh, and that could be from anyone. Oh yeah, actually, or the audience, yeah. If James, you're going for answering the question and not a question.
Yeah, do you have an answer or a question?
Yeah, no, I have an answer, I think.
Go for it.
Is it a principle? Well, I want to say psychological safety. I don't know how to frame that as a principle, but I would say creating an environment where any talent can try something and fail and be supported and learn through that is probably, for me, one of the most fundamental things that you can provide.
Yeah, that sounds about right. It does make a lot of sense. I guess like the question kind of stems from like, I think we have a lot of different frameworks and different ways of kind of solving solution and in different organizations. And I guess what I was trying to kind of come to is like, what are some of the more fundamental distilled like things that if you can get right, you can kind of get the other things wrong and you still come out with a fairly good outcome.
Samora, for me, I think we've brought on two junior engineers this year, and I think like never-ending and unwavering support, I think, is super important, because they do go through, I've noticed, like total roller coaster of emotions and thriving, surviving kind of journey. And a lot of the times, you know, they'll like go through a lot of self-doubt, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm winning at this, I'm doing really well. So you always just have to meet them where they are, and it can be really different from even day to day. So you just have to be supportive and be there for them.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, who was I cutting off? Okay, well, we've got Isaac and Phoenix, so we'll take questions from you. Maybe Isaac first.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on what Raymond said, because I think that's really important. I feel like there's often a point a month or so into a new job where you've been through the onboarding and, you know, the organized support sort of, you know, is completed and dropped off, and you can just feel thoroughly overwhelmed, and that feeling can go on, all of your career really. But yeah, I think it's important to be particularly sensitive to those points where it feels like you've done the main jobs of, you know, getting someone up to speed, but need to make that transition into sort of the ongoing support that's going to keep happening.
Isaac, do you feel like you have structures in place that do extend beyond that first month, and maybe they just kind of like taper away a little bit? Like, what does that look like?
Working on it. I'm reflecting more on my my own past experience. Yeah, one of the main things I'm trying to keep in mind is modeling ongoing learning ourselves and encouraging the, you know, the more experienced team members to sort of stay clearly, I'm reading this textbook or I'm doing this course, and at the end of it produce and sort of deliver a bit of a book report of, you know, I did this, and here are some notes I've made on parts of the book that were relevant to our particular tech stack, you know, or our work, parts that were not so relevant, so that the next person who picks it up, maybe with less experience, knows how to focus their learning a bit more, and it helps sort of guide people into not just learning for themselves, but, you know, treating it as a community. Yeah,
I love that. I would say that the other thing that I do also, I work with a lot of career changers, but it actually applies in my experience to new jobs as well as totally new careers, is that like for the first 6 months, I always feel like I have no idea what I'm doing, and I perhaps have made a horrible mistake. And then at about the 6-month point, I get to feel like I can actually judge that with some level of objectivity. And maybe I have made a horrible mistake, but that it hasn't turned out that way yet.
Thanks so much, Isaac. Great question and elaboration. Yeah, really appreciate you sharing that. I'll ask Phoenix, who had your hand up before, if you had a question.
Oh yeah, thank you. I just wanted to piggyback onto the current discussion. So in the past year, I've worked with about a dozen different junior developers, actually exclusively from Dev Academy Aotearoa. Full disclosure, I work with a lot of grads and students at Dev Academy. It's just part of the work that I do. And what I see that they all have in common is, like, for developers of every skill level, software development is like 10% coding and 90% detective work and discovery. And the discovery part is actually the fun part. Like, learning is what's fun about this for most developers. And what I found is that junior developers are really no different from developers of any other skill level in that respect. They love to learn. And so it's kind of like, I do everything I can just to encourage that and And someone mentioned psychological safety. That's perfect. Like putting them in situations where like they feel safe to ask questions, where they feel safe to understand, to put up their hand and say, I don't know this, or I don't know the answer to that. And I've seen on pretty much every project I've worked on, I've seen a junior dev teaching a senior dev something that they didn't know. There's one project I worked on. There was a junior dev that taught everybody on the team, including the tech lead, stuff about Storybook that just they didn't know. And I've seen this with lots of other things with Web3, with WebSockets. So look, junior dev is just the description of how long that person's been coding, but all the other skills, like all the human skills, sorry, my first language is American, bear with me. The deductive reasoning, right? Like the problem solving skill, those are embedded in every single person. And we just find the best ways to bring those out.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, such a great perspective. It's really important to remember that it's not always juniors taking support and then seniors giving it. It's like very much, ideally, it would always be a two-way dialogue between any two team members. Yeah, I think we'll just take Jasper's question and then we'll move to breakout rooms and pause the recording. So Jasper had a question in the chat. Thoughts on balancing group training for clusters versus more tailored coaching and development? I feel like sometimes mass onboarding exercises can have mixed levels of engagement, but sometimes things are like a universally good idea and it's tempting to do it in a group.
Yeah, I think definitely a mix. And I think that that probably, you know, to some extent, you'll get efficiencies by onboarding a group because there are some things that you can deliver en masse, but each person should probably still have an individual mentor who's looking after them and meeting with them one-on-one. They should have individual, you know, goal setting. I think that probably the main thing that I'm excited about in terms of like hiring in clusters is the fact that these folks who are going through a similar experience are going to bond in a completely informal way, right? A completely unofficial way. And so, you know, I mean, even if everything else still stayed the same, like maybe you deliver nothing in a group setting, but they will still probably identify a little bit as a group and help support each other through that process. So even if you don't get any official formal time on the clock economy of scale from hiring a cluster, you will still reap benefits. So, you know, I think your customization within that scale is broad.
Thank you, Tiff.
I was going to add just quickly on that because I said that I've seen it all and it all works. I agree, but in our sort of 10 to 12 week internships, we often recommend or see success when the first week is that sort of mix of the group and the cohort coming through, and then it becomes extremely customized. But that exactly what Elise said, the bonding is as important as the learning. So yeah, mix it up is good.
Awesome, great question. Cool, so I think we'll pause the recording-y part of the talk here. Thanks everyone, anyone who's joining us async and watching this later. Really appreciate that. And yeah, we'll move on to the breakout rooms. Yeah, and I didn't mention this at the start, but like the purpose of Tech Leader Chats is to have a space for like leaders to learn and grow together and learn with their peers and share their experiences, and to also share ways of putting diversity, equity, inclusion into practice in the day-to-day when we're all very busy with, you know, our products and business goals, how we can really put it into practice. So yeah, like please join us next time if you're hopping off at this point, and yeah, we'd love to see you. Yes, so, oh, and thanks for that. Yeah, you can join the Slack, we have a Slack community as well, where you'll get reminders for the stuff. And if you've joined the meetup, you'll also get reminders. We've got our next one at the end of October. So yes, and then I think we can pause recording now and